place. Good morning, good morning.
Welcome back to the morning show on Tobago Updates Television. I am Adanna Combie, and I thank you so much for staying with us. All right, we continue conversations this morning, and right now we head on over to speaking with Mr. Barry Joefield, and he is an economic and financial commentator. And this morning we're talking about two specific topics, and we're going to start off by speaking about T.H.A. and corporate governance. Good morning, Mr. Joefield, and welcome.
Good morning, Ms. Combie. Good morning, Tobago.
Right, it's a pleasure to have you on this morning. And before we get into our conversation this morning, of course, talking about the topic of corporate governance, for the sake of our viewers, let us put a definition to what we mean by when we say corporate governance.
Okay, well, I guess basically we could break it up into the two aspects of the name. Corporate meaning business, and governance meaning how you operate this business in a way that gives confidence to the stakeholders that are concerned with this business. So in simple terms, how you operate a corporate entity in a way that provides trust and gives confidence to the stakeholders in the particular business.
All right, and your position is that there are challenges in terms of that relationship with how we operate here in Trinidad and Tobago, and primarily in the Tobago space with the Tobago House of Assembly?
Yes, I am very much of that opinion. And I just wanted to put this into context. Tobago is starved for developmental capital. And I am submitting that we would not get that developmental capital from Trinidad. I'm submitting that we would have to get that developmental capital from external sources to Trinidad. And what we do in terms of corporate governance will dictate whether or not international organizations, investors find confidence in Tobago and are willing to invest in Tobago. And it is in that context the corporate governance becomes critical and important, even in the context of Trinidad and Tobago, because to convince Trinidad to give you more money, then the way you operate your business must be such that you are able to elicit trust, confidence that you are doing business in a proper manner, in a transparent manner, and you're more likely to get a fair hearing rather than if you were doing it in the way business is currently being done.
And when you talk about in the way business is currently being done, what are some of the areas you're talking about? How do you position yourself to attract that type of investment to improve the situation with corporate governance here on Tobago?
All right, so let's use a specific example, which is quite topical, of EIDCOT. Now, EIDCOT is supposed to be the flagship for investment into Tobago, the gas sector, and into other areas into Tobago. EIDCOT is managing the Manta Lodge Hotel. Tourism is a big economic issue for Tobago. You're trying to get investors to come in to manage the very Manta Lodge. You want to have port development at the very EIDCOT location. All those things would require foreign capital, foreign investment in order for it to happen. And if you have the kind of governance structure that is currently in place at EIDCOT, no private investor, no foreign investor is going to invest in EIDCOT in those circumstances. It's clearly out of sync with what corporate governance requires.
Can you speak to the structure that you're referring to in terms of how EIDCOT is set up?
Well, currently, my understanding is you have three quote-unquote directors. One of the directors is also executive director. In fact, the acting CEO. And that construct is a clear no-no for how you operate a corporate entity, because there is no proper oversight of what goes on at EIDCOT in that kind of context. As far as I understand, you don't have a chairman at EIDCOT. How do you operate a board without a chairman of a board? How do you make decisions? I mean, it behooves me as to how they are functioning at EIDCOT. And that is, part and parcel of what I'm referring to. You have, quote unquote, two directors. Is there a quorum? Is there a functioning board at all? How are you doing the business of Tobagonians spending millions in that kind of environment? And what signals are you sending to a potential investor who wants to invest in EIDCOT, either in port development, either in the Mantle Lodge, or either in establishing further physical infrastructure at EIDCOT?
Joefield, based on your intelligence, right? What is the construct? What is the correct or proper construct that this company should have or company should have in order to be carrying out business? Because at the end of the day, EIDCOT is carrying out the business. They are functioning, and you're saying that, of course, elements are missing. So what is supposed to be, or what do you think is the correct construct for business to be done? You also alluded to accountability because of the fact that there are only two directors there, and so how do you address what are the elements that construct or make up a corporate entity that can function in a way that is governable?
All right, so the first thing in this case in particular is that you need to have a separation of board and management. And there's clear commingling between board and management because you have executive who is functioning at the level of the board as well. So that's a clear no-no. You do those things in a temporary kind of situation where you may have a situation where a CEO might have been fired or has left the job, and you have a temporary situation where you would have somebody acting, maybe one of the directors functioning as a CEO, but it's not a construct that you maintain because the board is supposed to be governing the management of EIDCOT. And if you have the board and management being one and the same, who is governing the management? And this is a clear no-no. So you have to have a situation where there's a clear separation between your board and your management. And if I just give you a quick analogy as to Point Lisas, I think over the weekend I saw where the CEO there was sent on leave because of some issues with procurement during his tenure or something of the sort. How does that work if you have a situation where, and I'm not saying this is the case in the case of EIDCOT, but how do you have a situation where you have a CEO who is also functioning as a director and may do things that are inimical to the best interest of the company? How is the CEO to be reined in? How is accountability going to be done in EIDCOT? And I'm saying you must have a situation where the board is separate and you have the management that is separate, and you can't have a board running without a chairman. It's just not how you run a board. It's simply just not how you run a board.
Understandably so. Mr. Joefield, we have to go for a short break before we continue conversations this morning. This very, very interesting and important topic. Ladies and gentlemen, we're speaking with Mr. Barry Joefield. He's an economic and financial commentator, and we're speaking on the topic of T.H.A. corporate governance and addressing EIDCOT this morning. We do hope that you can stay with us as we continue this conversation and we get the information and speak on the things that matter here in Tobago. We're going to go for a short break, and when we come back, of course, we continue this conversation. But in the meantime, we invite you to help us. Share the live, share the live, share the live.
Put a smile on your face when you're moving from.
Welcome back, and thank you so much for staying with us this morning. We're just about 7:45 a.m. So I'm telling you, it's back to school. So if you're not yet at your office or close to, you might be a little bit late this morning with the additional traffic on our nation's roads. But I thank you for staying with us this morning. We continue conversations with Mr. Barry Joefield, and he is an economic and financial commentator. And this morning we're speaking about corporate governance. Welcome back, Mr. Joefield.
Thanks once again.
Right. So we were talking about so many things as it relates to corporate governance, and you mentioned also the attraction for capital for development on the island of Tobago, stating that because of the construct of some of the companies, it will be difficult for us to attract that type of investment, right? the capital for development here on the island of Tobago. And so you spoke about EIDCOT and the construct there. What are some of the other things that we can do in terms of positioning Tobago to attract any type of capital, whether it is from central government, whether it is from foreign investors, to support the development here on the island of Tobago?
Well, I think, in essence, what Tobago needs is what I will call a Tobago Invest company, for want of a better word, that is a one-stop shop where investors can reach to Tobago. Tobago also needs to develop a portfolio of investment opportunities, whether or not it be in the financial sector, in the tourism sector, in agriculture, and be able to have a prospectus that you can send out to all and sundry. There was a visit to the diaspora in New York, I think maybe 2 weeks ago or thereabouts. And that is what you go with. You go with your prospectus about what areas specifically you would want who investors to invest their capital into. And so the very basic requirement is for some agency that facilitates this kind of communication. I'm sure at this point it's a puzzle. Maybe if you're an investor and you wanted to invest in Tobago, where do you actually go to have this conversation? What are the areas that you can invest in? Is there a program? Is there a portfolio of possibilities? And I'm saying at the very basic level, that is what is required in my mind, that you need to have some agency that is your investment agency that probably looks also at the ease of doing business, track the ease of doing business, look at the parameters and figure out where Tobago is on those parameters and address those matters. How quick can somebody form a company? How quick you could get your company registered? How quick could the company begin operating? That kind of thing. You need an environment that is conducive to investment.
All right. So,
Basically.
Mr. Joefield, you're talking about creating a hub where investors can find specific areas for investment here on the island of Tobago. Let's say, for instance, you are given the responsibility to construct this hub and to create this portfolio that you're talking about where investors can look, a one-stop shop for an investor to find an opportunity to inject some type of capital here on the island of Tobago for development. You mentioned tourism and agriculture. Have you identified specific programs or initiatives that are being done by Tobago or can be done because Tobago is ripe with opportunity? Have you identified any such thing that can be done on the island of Tobago to literally attract? Because you talk about the basics. We want to get into the details now in terms of attracting an investor to say, oh, this is an absolute amazing opportunity for an investment here on the island of Tobago.
Well, yes, I have some clear ideas about it. In the sense that, okay, we probably have maybe about 5 or maybe a few more of what we would call T.H.A. companies that I think can be attractive to an investor. So I give you a perfect example, Pigeon Point. Pigeon Point is a world-renowned resort. Even if you wish to maintain 51% shareholding by the T.H.A., then there's a 49% that you can sell and raise capital for other developments in Tobago. In fact, you raise capital now to further develop Pigeon Point because Pigeon Point can be further developed. So that's one example. You have Spell, Studley Park Quarries Limited, and I'd always mention it. It's an opportunity that any investor would want to make an investment into. And I'm saying you monetize this thing, you value it, and you sell the shares to the company. In fact, one of the things I think we need to be doing seriously is to be looking at a Tobago Stock Exchange where you cross-list companies in Guyana, companies in Trinidad and Tobago, companies in Barbados. I mean, you create an environment for investment in Tobago. And I'm saying, I'm submitting that those are some of the low-hanging fruits that you can begin to look at your companies. TADCO, you can look at a different construct for TADCO that allows people to invest in agricultural development in Tobago. And I'm saying, so you could start with your low-hanging fruits, where the T.H.A has some level of control, and look at the companies that are under the aegis of the T.H.A and have those companies, listed on some exchange in Tobago that allows capital to reach these companies to develop them and so on. Because they start for capital, and the capital will not come from the central government. It needs to come from foreign investment, and you need to set up the kind of arrangements that would allow that to happen.
All right, Mr. Joefield, I really appreciate your input there where this is concerned, and I do hope that the conversation continues and that we see some movement in that direction. Of course, we welcome any type of development here on the island of Tobago. It's a beautiful place, and there's lots of opportunities here for investment. So we look forward to, some measure of movement here on the island of Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been speaking with Mr. Barry Joefield, economic and financial commentator, speaking about corporate governance, the relationship between the T.H.A and corporate Tobago as it relates to attracting investment here on the island of Tobago. Before we go, Mr. Joefield, is there anything you want to say in closing?
What I want to say in closing is that, listen, we need to tone down on the political rhetoric and look at Tobago just being the island, as you mentioned, of opportunities where people can invest. Because the corporate governance issue is not a new issue. It is an issue that has been with us, and it will continue to be with us until we focus the mind on what accountabilities do we require from these companies, what accountabilities do we require from the T.H.A, and unless and until we demand that accountability as citizens of Tobago, and forget the fetters of the political reality, we are doomed to go nowhere in Tobago. But we are full of possibilities, and I trust that as Tobagonians we would request and demand the transparency and accountability that will allow capital to come from Trinidad and to come from other areas of the world to develop Tobago in the way we would like to see it developed.
Amazing stuff, and I do agree. Tobago is beautiful, and we want to continue maintaining and even improving the beauty that we have here, providing opportunities for all and sundry who have that type of interest here on the island of Tobago, primarily our citizens here in Tobago. Thank you so much, Mr. Joefield, for joining us this morning and for bringing your insight to this very important conversation. We do hope that the conversation, as I said, continues and that we can get some level of movement from there. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to go for a short break before we continue. Yes, we're going to go for a break and continue. So we do hope that you stay with us. And as you stay with us, we invite you to help us share the live, share the live, share the live. We'll be right back.